The 1995 production of Pride and Prejudice had a huge impact worldwide. Its modern pace and contemporary delivery succeeded in making costume drama accessible to television audiences in a manner few other productions had achieved before. The success of Pride and Prejudice also inspired a new approach to historical dramas, with the traditional stagey productions being left behind in favour of the more pacey, modern interpretations that obviously appealed to today's audiences. This interpretation isn't compromised by the trends of the current day, and consequently, Pride and Prejudice still has a timeless, legitimate and authentic feel to it. To celebrate this unique production, we take a look back at the making of the show, with key members of the cast and crew, and discuss the impact and continuing influence of this remarkable show.
The reason I decided I wanted to do Pride and Prejudice, I went to a screening of Northanger Abbey, and I sat next to Andrew Davis, who he'd actually been my English tutor at college. I said, what I really am passionate about doing is a production of Pride and Prejudice, but I really want to do it not in a new modern version. I just want to bring out what I really think the book is about, which I never felt had been brought out in the balance that it should have been. And I said to him, which might have been a mistake, I said, of course, it's all about sex and money. And he said, well, it's my favourite book too. So we actually shook hands on it and we said, OK, let's do it. It wasn't quite as easy as that, because it took 9 years from saying that to actually getting it on the screen. I think people think that we've done an updated version, but what I would say we've done is actually gone back to the book and really looked at what Jane Austen was doing. And if you look at Elizabeth's character, every single word that describes her is an energetic word. She always dashes into rooms or runs upstairs or leaps over stiles or climbs, or everything about her is full of life and energy. And that's why we did the production the way we did. We wanted to bring out what we thought was truly Jane Austen's characteristics of Elizabeth.
Also the adaptation by Andrew Davis, he stuck to Jane Austen's dialogue. There's hardly a line that's different. And Jane Austen did have a great sense of theatre, and she wrote very good lines, although that's not easy to say. But they did cast a team of people who were able to do it.
I suppose right from the start, I thought that Colin Firth would be perfect casting for Darcy. He was doing a show in Ireland, a film, and he'd had to put on a lot of weight and dye his hair blonde and got a moustache. And he'd got this very long, terrible overcoat on, and he did look pretty awful. And the director said to me afterwards, we can't cast him, he looks like an unmade bed. And various other people thought he wasn't right. And then Colin had decided to do it, and then his brother said, but you can't play Darcy, you're not sexy. Or isn't Darcy sexy? He's supposed to be sexy. So Colin did actually temporarily pull out, and had to put all the pressure I could on him to do it. We not only talked to people, but we auditioned, and then for the ones who didn't have a huge track record, we actually did screen tests. I mean, we screen tested Jennifer Ely, for instance, actually rather brilliantly, because she knew from meeting me that we wanted a dark-haired Elizabeth, and she was rather blonde at the time. And I didn't realise this, but she dyed her eyebrows the night before dark, so that when we put the dark wig on her for the screen test, we all said, gosh, that works really well. She looks as if she's a natural brunette.
I first got the job in May, I think, and we didn't start filming till June. And the first thing the BBC did was very kindly teach me how to ride. So they'd drive me out on lovely sunny afternoons, and I'd leave my impoverished friends who I was living with at the time behind and go off to lovely fields in the countryside and be taught how to ride.
The person who put my name forward, who suggested me, was the art director, Jerry Scott. And what happened after that, I don't know. Obviously, everybody agreed. But I think she suddenly went, how about Alison Steadman to play Mrs. Bennet? And there we are. So thank you, Jerry. Brilliant.
One of my preoccupations, actually, because I am a sort of worrier beforehand, was that I was too old. I mean, I hate to say, I was nearly 40 when I played it. So I actually had my 40th birthday. And I was thinking I'm too old because Mr. Collins has really just left you know, one of the universities, and he's probably only 23 or 24.
To get the role of Mary Bennet, I had one audition. I read the book twice the day before. I literally kind of sat there for sort of about 8 hours and read the novel twice. Underlined everything that was mentioned about Mary, every possible bit she was in, and went along and read. And very, very luckily was offered the job very quickly after that.
The actor who was slated to play Wickham, who I don't know if I can name, was given the, well, I think probably had withdrawn for probably had been offered some huge feature film or something, I don't know. And suddenly the part of Mr. Wickham became available, and so I'd sort of suddenly got the leading baddie, which is of course a fantastic part to play.
Around about the time that I knew I was going to play Mr. Bennet, I was lucky enough to meet a writer called Park Honan, American biographer, wrote a very good biography of Jane Austen, and when he was researching it, he said to me, I met an old lady, and this old lady, when she was a little girl, knew an old lady who, when she was a little girl, knew Jane Austen. Now, it may have been 3 generations, I think it must have been, but it came back to him, down these 3 generations, that the person in all of her books who was most like Jane Austen in character, in personality, was not any of her heroines, it was Mr. Bennet. I was very surprised to hear this. And he said, well, if you think about it, what does Mr. Bennet do? He's there at the events, he participates, he enjoys the parties, he enjoys the balls, but he doesn't join in too much. He's there, observing. And that's what Jane Austen did.
When we decided that we wanted Carl Davis to do the music, all the heating had gone off at the BBC and it was absolutely freezing. Everybody was in overcoats and shivering. And he came into the office and we were so cold. I thought, I can't actually talk to him here. So we said, let's go to the canteen, which was the only place that had heating on. So we went to the canteen, which was quite full of people trying to have their meetings in the canteen, all with coats and mufflers on. And we sat down with Carl, who's completely unself-conscious when it comes to music. And he said, we were talking about various bits and what we might use. And he said, well, I've got this idea. And he said, when Mary has to sing this song very, very badly, he said, I thought we'd do this wonderful Handel piece. Very, very high it is. At which point he then burst into song very loudly, falsetto. And the whole canteen stopped. Everybody having their meetings and their lunches and their teas just stopped, while Carl, not even realising, sang the whole of this Handel song. I thought, yes, we really have to have Carl.
Pride and Prejudice is set in the first decade of the 19th century, and if we think about it, what was the musical life like? There was no radio, no television, no CDs. Everything had to be made live. And because there was this sort of lack of being entertained, they had to entertain each other. And so in a family of girls, people would have learned different skills. You know, they would play instruments, they would learn to sing, they might recite, they may do all sorts of things. They certainly danced a lot. There was one character who very distinctly in the novel, her job is to provide the music, and it's always really very clear that she's not very good at it and is sort of suffers doing it and is suffered with people listening. But she always has to play, and she's, you know, people who are very bossy and play we want to dance, play we want to sing, or sing for us, play for us.
Mary, play Grimstock.
Once I'd been offered the job, I then had to have a meeting with Carl Davis, the composer, to check whether I could play the piano. And I had slightly lied in the audition and said that I did play the piano extremely well. And I had played the piano at school, but I hadn't played it for at least 9 years when I went to the audition. So I then had a very, very quick few piano lessons before meeting Carl Davis and went and did the most appalling rendition of Moonlight Sonata in his amazingly beautiful house on this extraordinary grand piano. And I thought, I'm going to lose the job now because I've just humiliated myself and it's obvious that I can't really play the piano that well. And I remember leaving his house and ringing my agent and crying down the phone and saying, I've lost the job, I'm so sorry. And they called and sort of they called my agent a few hours later and said, "Oh, it's great because she plays the piano as badly as Mary Bennett." so I think they thought I'd done it deliberately. I hadn't at all.
People forget that there's a lot of acting goes into it. I mean, I didn't really know what Mr. Bennett was like. I had to think about it. I eventually thought, oh, well, he smiles a lot, doesn't he? He smiles. Whatever he's doing, whatever he's saying, he keeps smiling. And underneath, the thoughts are there. But I think everybody would say who was in it that they were doing character acting.
When you are making something that's 6 hours long and you're playing a great character, you do have time to come to grips with it.
I read the script, I saw the woman, I knew what she was like, I knew what I wanted to do with the part. And we went for a read-through at the BBC. And it was quite a pressured occasion because we read all 6 episodes. So we were there sort of all day. And we each had our places with our names in front.
And I think there were about 100 people in the room, all the actors and all the makeup and production, design, and lots of producers all sitting around this table. And it was very frightening. I had the first line as well, so I was particularly worried. I thought I'd just quickly nip to the loo and just make sure I was absolutely ready. And I sat down in the cubicle and I heard Colin Firth in the next door cubicle sounding rather worried. So that was how I met Colin. It was both of us coming out of our cubicles at the same time.
The rehearsal process was really wonderful because for most television you don't get any rehearsal at all. And we were together, I think, for about a week before we came onto location. And we were seated, so the Bennett family were all together, and yes, all the characters were seated near the people who were close to them in the story.
And I remember very clearly there was a bottle of water and a bottle of apple juice and a glass in front of everyone. And for a reason best known to myself, I decided I would drink apple juice. Now, you tried drinking apple juice, sipping it for 6 hours. By the 5th hour, you feel mighty sick, your stomach's full of acid. So I remember, by reading the final episode, feeling really queasy, sort of having consumed 2 bottles of apple juice or something crazy. But I decided on that day that I would go for it. I wouldn't sort of just do a quiet, gentle reading, but I would, really jump in the deep end and have a go and see what happened. And Simon Langton and Sue Birtwistle, the director and producer, were very, very pleased because I think they felt that because I did that, it encouraged other people also to bring their performance up and so that they could really hear the piece and hear what they'd got.
I worked with Adrian Lucas, in fact, at the same time I first worked with Colin Firth. A film called Dutch Girls, and they both played 18-year-old schoolboys on a hockey trip to Amsterdam. So they were both in their school blazers and caps.
I think it turns up now in the porn section of video shops occasionally. It wasn't at all Dutch Girls. So people get very disappointed.
I won't give you the stories of that, but let's say that art lived down to life.
And in fact, night one, very early days at least, I went up and he and I got absolutely hammered in the hotel bar. And he said, I bet I've got a bigger room than yours. It all sounds very Boys with Toys, doesn't it? And I said, yes, you probably have. You were playing Mr. Darcy. He said, right, come back to my room. So I went back, and he had a jacuzzi in his room as well. Cut a long story short, we ended up drinking quite a lot more and ended up in the jacuzzi. And Joanna David came in and took one look at us and was shrieking with laughter and said, I've got to get a camera and get shots of this. So we were there like, over here. And the next day, Simon Langton came in and went, oh God, what have I done? Casting you two together.
We stayed in the Old Bailey Malmesbury, it's beautiful hotel stroke pub. And I know it sounds terribly embarrassing now, but Adrian Lucas and I both play the guitar, he much better than I, and I think he'd taken his or I'd taken mine or something, or maybe we both had them. And one night after a sort of extended meal in the dining room there, we were sort of playing something James Taylor or, down in the dining room. And we got a member of the staff came in and said Lucy Briers had asked, she was in bed trying to get some rest for filming early the next day and will be stopped.
It was totally scrambled, the shoot dates, in terms of the story. So we filmed a lot of the stuff that comes right at the end of the story. We filmed right at the beginning, and even though I don't appear for, I think, hardly at all as Mr. Bingley in episodes 4 and 5, I was filmed regularly over the whole 4-month period that we shot it.
I think the shoot was about 22 weeks with for most of us a hiatus in the middle when they went off to do Pemberley.
The first week we mainly filmed with Jennifer and Colin, Darcy and Elizabeth, and Mr. Collins and his wife, and Lady Catherine de Bourgh. So we were filming at Huntsford, as it were. And we actually had to do some of the most difficult scenes early on. So we actually had to do the proposal scene where Lizzie turns him down 2 days into shooting, which is not ideal. And it was very scary because I thought we'll either pull this off or not, and if we don't pull it off, we're sunk because we have to build towards this over 20 weeks of shooting, but we can't.
This meant that when we came to the early scenes, we already knew each other very well. Right, we'd relaxed, and so the early scenes, which are much more humorous and light-hearted, and we were able to play together more easily because we got to know each other by that time. So that's why there's a great sense of ease in those early scenes. When we come rushing back to church and I throw the coals on the fire and Mrs. Bennet's raging at me, and I turn round and blandly, comment on what she's saying and tease her over Mr. Bingley. All those scenes were done late on, so we'd already got a sort of ease with each other by that time.
I remember the early scenes that I shot were actually when Mr. Collins was already married, so you don't do it in sequence, obviously, and we went up to a lovely rectory in Tay in Leicestershire to shoot that. In fact, it was quite near the house, that Belton House, that was used for Lady Catherine de Bourgh. So there you are, jumping into the story, sort of waist deep.
The first scene was a scene when Elizabeth, I think, was refusing to meet Mr. Collins or to have tea with Mr. Collins or something like that. And Mrs. Bennet is in a state about it, and she rushes to Mr. Bennet, knocks on his study door, and she says, "Mr. Bennet, please, will you talk to your daughter? Tell her this is most important that she entertain, this is, a matter of life and death, and she's really in a, hysterical sort of state." And that was my first scene.
The first day when I think I slept about 2 hours, actually, the night before. Colin was down in the bar, very relaxed. I remember thinking, disturbingly relaxed with the other actors, which is, of course, how you should be. And I went to bed and I think sort of woke up every hour on the dot. I think I was probably being picked up at 6. I think I had about 2 hours sleep. And all I had to do was go in, and I think it was the scene where I go in and say that he wanted a cheque from Mr. Darcy. And Darcy writes him a cheque and he says, "I'm much obliged to you," or something, and walks out of the room. That's all it was, but I'd got myself in a lather of... And I think it looked fine, but I do remember that being a particularly gripe-inducing moment.
I remember arriving here at Luckington Court and being absolutely petrified. I think the unit had been filming for about 10 days, so there was already a sense of camaraderie. And when you first walk into that as the new girl, it's very frightening. And I was just so terrified that I would do something wrong or make a mistake, or So I think I spent that entire first scene, which was in the hallway of Luckington Court, with I think Susanna Harker and Polly Maberley. I think I must have looked like a rabbit in headlights, to be honest. So I don't know. I hope that's not why they cut it.
Susanna Harker, who played Jane Bennet, was much more experienced than me, done a lot more than me. I think when she first saw who was playing Mr. Bingley, she was a little bit shocked that this unknown actor was going to be the love of her life.
The makeup designer researched the period very well, and at the time they They did wear some makeup occasionally, but that was usually when they were going out to a ball or a big occasion. And that would usually be just a little rouge and maybe something on the lips. But generally, the women were very much, natural, let their natural beauty shine through.
Aye, they have arms and legs enough between them.
She is tolerable, I suppose. But she's not handsome enough to tempt me.
And when Mrs. Bennet went to a ball, say Netherfield Hall, she would then get the rouge out and probably, put too much on then. But I couldn't wear any mascara. That was quite tough.
The makeup department gave me absolutely no makeup whatsoever. I used to go into the makeup van every morning and just sort of sit there while the rest of my sisters were beautified around me, and I just was made to have greasy hair, and a sort of whiff of powder was sort of thrown across my face, and then I was thrown out. But I loved playing her so much, I really didn't mind.
Caroline, our wig lady, had got me a pair of mutton chops, you see, and I put them on, and they were just vast and ridiculous, swamping my face, you see. And I got in quite a panic about this, you see. Everybody else was having their hair done, and I was stuck with these mutton chops, trying to do something with them. And eventually, I screamed out and said, "Look, they're no good, they're too big. And she came along, and she was so skilled. She just went snip, 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 and put them on, and they were perfect.
It's not half the battle, but it certainly helps that makeup and wardrobe will put you through the various things at 6:30, 7 in the morning. So in Wickham's case, sideburns, hair teased into place, and then into these fantastically expensive costumes that were, I think, handmade in Italy. And it does give you a kind of, the boots and the tight breeches. It's quite nice, it's fun. And that does go halfway to creating, you can't slouch in those costumes, for instance, you can't. And you've got to wear them with a certain amount of dignity because otherwise you look crap,
The director, Simon Langton, at one point I walked onto set in a particular dress, which was a sort of red tartan type pattern. And he just looked at me and he said, "You look like a Formica table." And I went, "Oh, I quite like this dress." And so that dress was then known as the Formica dress. I loved my costumes. Again, they were very plain. They were the plainest of all the Bennet girls, but they were so right for the character that it just enabled me as the actor to feel that I was Mary Bennet.
Well, we were filming, I remember, in the hall of the Bennet's house, and it was wonderful because we had these huge fires burning, and there was an enormous fireplace, I remember, and every room in the house had these enormous fires. Well, of course, fires have to be controlled, so there's a guy comes along and his job is to do all the fires, and they're all sort of gassed so that we can cut a scene and the heat can be taken down and the flames can come up again. And so we were filming all day with this chap, and I was chatting to him various times, and that evening we had a wonderful party, and it was outside and there were drinks and things, and we played boule, and there were various boule courts or whatever you call them, and we were put into teams, and I was partnered with this guy that had been working on the fires all day. So we started to play, and I got very involved in this, and we had a fun evening, and that was that. So next morning I'm back as Mrs. Bennet again and on the set, and this chap comes in to do the fires, and I said, "Oh, hi." I said, "It was a good party last night, wasn't it?" And he said, "Yeah, it was really nice." And I said, "Yeah." I said, the bull was good fun, wasn't it?" He said, "Well, it was, but I got stuck with this woman, and she took it so seriously. She kept saying, 'Okay, this time we're going to win. This time we're going to win.'" And because it was me. He didn't know that I was the woman because he'd only ever seen me in costume.
Oh, and now he's meddling with our dearest girl.
And one of the things that I found surprisingly easy, actually, was the dialogue. Andrew Davis wrote this fantastically speakable adaptation, and it was full of modern vulgarisms. Darcy was described several times as looking as though someone had farted.
The thing about Jane Austen is she writes extremely well, and as anyone will tell you, if dialogue is well written, it's easy to say because it's true and it means something and it's right for that character. The problems actors face normally is having to deal with woeful dialogue and trying to make it sound believable. This was not hard to make sound believable. Should I say that? Perhaps my performance was appallingly badly structured and untrue, but I hope not.
There's always a problem in a show like Pride and Prejudice of how much you play it down and naturalise it.
Yeah, I mean, the part is there on the page, really, and all you have to do as the actor is to serve the dialogue that's been written for you.
However, a lot of the actors found it very, very difficult to learn. Some of them, Alison, for instance, and Julia Sawalha and Jennifer Ealey, all said that they found it sometimes that it was more difficult than learning Shakespeare, which puzzled me. But then I realised when you actually look at Jane Austen's dialogue, she does it so, I mean, trying not to be too technical about it, she puts the power of the sentence at the end of the sentence. So you work your way through a clause or two and finish with the powerful verb usually at the end, which gives it this life and kick about it.
Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins. And I will never see you again if you do.
Oh, Mr. Bennet!
At first, the first couple of weeks, I found the language quite difficult, the phrasing, and also because when we were filming, we had to be exact. If the script was actually quoting Jane Austen, absolutely. If it was reported from the book, we couldn't be wrong with a the or an a or a but. It had to be. And some scenes were very, very difficult. And Mrs. Bennet is one of those women that she does rabbit on. You know, she uses 10 sentences when she could use one.
You are to us.
Yeah, well.
Oh, girls, is he not a good father? And never to tell us what a good joke. Oh, and now you shall all dance with Mr. Bingley.
I used to finish a scene and I think, great, I've done that, brilliant. And then continuity would come over and say, I'm really sorry, but you said this instead of that or something. And I can't know. And Simon Langton, our lovely director, would say, I'm really sorry, Alison, but we'll have to go again. And right, okay. But they were that keen on everything being 100% accurate.
Our life holds few distinctions, Mrs. Bennet, but I think we may safely boast that here sit two of the silliest girls in the country.
Jane Austen's dialogue is quite hard in terms of the grammar that she uses is often almost topsy-turvy in comparison to how we speak. However, I didn't really have that much to say in Pride and Prejudice. I just sort of sat doing embroidery and looking miserable a lot of the time. And I think also it did help that I've done a lot of Shakespeare. And I think if you have classical experience, then it's not nearly as difficult.
I believe the rewards of observation and reflection are much greater. And so they are when there are none others to be had. We shall have to be philosophers, Mary.
But this dialogue is quite formal a lot of the time. I think at the heart of it, as long as you have Elizabeth, who is functioning on a slightly more pliable and natural level than everybody else, and I think she does that brilliantly, Jennifer, then the rest of the cast can do their thing. She is the heart of it. She's the pulse for the audience, and surrounded by this kind of mini circus of people.
You must go and make what you can of it. Yours ever, Caroline Bingley. Very elegant hand.
May I have the carriage, Father?
The carriage? No, indeed. You must go on horseback, for it looks like rain. Then you will have to stay the night.
Mother!
Well, why do you look at me like that? Would you go all the way to Netherfield and back without seeing Mr. Bingley?
I think I did try and change some of the dialogue at one point, or to put in a couple of things from the book that had been left out, which was fairly firmly squashed, probably rightly so, by Sue and Andrew, who said, well, look, we've worked very hard on this for a long time, and this is the dialogue we've come up with, and that was fine. I hear your cousin, Mr. Collins, is engaged to be married.
Yes, to my good friend Charlotte Lucas.
I had thought that his intentions tended in another direction.
Perhaps they did. They took a little turn to everybody's satisfaction.
And relief.
I was always in awe of Alison Steadman and Ben Wittrow during the breakfast scene.